and today I'm going to tell you a story about my grandmother. Before we start, I want you to picture someone you love who could live far away from you or right down the street. Because at the end of this story, you're going to get a chance to write them a letter using a template made by our friends at Imagine You. I was 6 years old when I first met my grandma, and before I ever met her, I knew that I loved her. From the way my family spoke about her to the way my sister would cry over the phone with her wanting to meet her, I had no doubt in my mind about how I felt. Then one day, we got a chance to go all the way to Egypt to meet her. After a long 12-hour flight, we finally landed on the streets of Alexandria, surrounded by towering skyscrapers and buildings. As we got closer and closer to our town of Abu Talet, the asphalt streets turned into dirt roads, and the cars were replaced by donkeys and horses pulling carriages. The roads were filled with hopping frogs and neighborhood cats. It was a complete shock to my system. It was like sensory overload. We finally pulled up to a big house with big blue gates, and on the other side, I was awestruck. Awestruck by the walls of oranges, by the sandboxes with date trees sprouting out of them, and by the grapevines lining the garden walls. But what took my breath away most of all was meeting my grandma for the first time. She was exactly like I pictured her. She was an old woman with a kind face and rounded rectangular white glasses, kind of like mine, and she wore a hijab, which is a headscarf, which to me only accentuated her beauty. My grandma was one of the toughest women I'd ever get to meet. She didn't take nonsense from anyone. One time my grandma was looking for the bowls that she would use to freeze ice for the water coolers, and she couldn't find them. After doing some digging, we realized that my mom had taken them to store soup from the day before, and my grandma called her stupid. Me being 6 years old took this very seriously and immediately jumped to my mom's defense. My mom's not stupid. Yes, she is. No, she's not. Wallahi. My grandma, knowing that I was a child, shrugged this off, but later I learned that she had gone to my mom and told her about it, and they just laughed about it. Later I realized it was never that deep, but live and learn. One day she came home from a trip out, and her hair was suddenly red. She had dyed it without telling anyone, and all the men in my family tried to ridicule her. My grandpa asked her what she had done, and she said she did not care. It was her hair, and she was right. Again, she didn't take nonsense from anyone. Another day, as I was having dinner with her, she told me her real name. Everyone called her Hikmet, but she swore up and down her name was Hikmah. That's what her mother had called her, and that's what she knew her name to be. My grandpa came in and tried to argue, but she swore up and down that's what her name was. And to this day, when people try to tell me Hikmet was her name, I argue right back, because I knew the truth straight from the source. But despite her toughness, my grandma was one of the sweetest women on the planet. She would always be the only one awake when I would wake up at the crack of dawn, and she would have breakfast with me. Breakfast that consisted of shay beleban, tea with milk, goat cheese, and bread. I thought the goat cheese was weird, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings, so I ate it anyway. She also knew how much I loved animals, but that my animal skills needed some work. The cats in the garden would always run away from me because I would chase them. But she taught me one way to lure them close was to pretend you had tuna in your hand, or to get them to chase a string of yarn. The cats didn't stay for long, but it worked in the moment. I cherished every moment I had with my grandma, but eventually we had to leave Egypt and go back home. But through the years, her memories never left my heart. Every time I would see a stray cat on the street and pet it, I would think of her. Then when I turned 14, I made it my mission to convince my parents to adopt a cat. They found every excuse in the book. You're allergic, there's a cat shortage, there's not enough room, etc., but eventually they caved. And when I was 15, we adopted our cat Styles at 3 months old on a very special cultural holiday called Eid. Styles was a calico cat, and she was orange, black, and white, and she was the cutest thing we'd ever seen. My family took to Styles immediately. All my family except my older sister, the one who used to cry over the phone about my grandma, because she was scared of Styles. Styles sometimes would go through these crazy hyper stages where the hair on the back of her body stood up and she would bolt through the house like a maniac, and my sister would lock the door in the middle of the night to make sure Styles couldn't come into her room. But now Styles sleeps on my sister's bed, so that didn't last for way too long. Styles was a light in our house, and in a weird way, even as a kitten, she felt like an old soul. Without jumping in your lap or meowing incessantly, she had a way of reassuring you and making you feel calm in her presence. And this came to a test less than a year after we got her. We woke up one morning to the sounds of phones ringing in our house, and it was a call from Egypt telling us that our grandma had died. This was obviously a devastating loss for our family. We didn't know how we were going to get through it, but weirdly, throughout the whole thing, Styles never left our side. She sat beside us when we collapsed in grief, and she meowed when we cried, and she just comforted us throughout the whole process. And I truly believe if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have been able to heal the same. It was as if even across oceans, through the years, even in death, my grandma and her love for cats and Styles' presence in our life connected us to her, as though by a thread of yarn. Our connections to our loved ones are what keeps them with us, even when they're no longer physically here. That's why I want to introduce you guys to the newest member of my family. Hello, Harissa. Harissa is named after an Egyptian dish, which is a Middle Eastern dessert that's a cake slathered in honey, sometimes with nuts and sometimes without, but it's delicious. And I named her that because she's so cute. I just want to eat her up. Now guys, I want you, if you have a loved one in mind, to use the template that's in the description and write a letter to your loved ones. Appreciate them while they're here and know that even if they aren't anymore, that doesn't mean they'll ever leave your heart.